everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Ashley, and if you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for being here. I hope you all enjoy this video. Today we are going to talk about childbirth. And this is a video that I've been wanting to do for quite a while, but I always hesitate because childbirth can be a very sensitive topic and a very heavy topic for some women, as it should be, because as we all know, childbirth is no joke. But I really wanted to share my birthing stories and also my tips and encouragement that I have for anyone who would like to pursue a natural birthing experience in the hospital. If you don't know me, we have two daughters. They're now 1 and 3 years old, and I had them both in the hospital 100% naturally. So I just wanted to encourage you, because I know when I was preparing to give birth, especially the first time around, I came across a lot of discouragement and fear and doubts and feeling like, is it even possible to have a natural birth in a hospital? I was afraid that I was going to be pressured into doing things I didn't want to do, and that I was going to have all these unnecessary interventions. So I just wanted to share with you my experiences, because when I was preparing to give birth, one of my main sources of research was YouTube. I would go and watch videos like this, or I would just watch live natural birthing videos just to familiarize myself with what that looked like. And so I guess this is my way of just kind of returning the favor, because that helped me out so much. And I hope to help other women who are in the same situation, because it can come with some challenges, but it can also work out just fine and go really well. So I just want to share that with you today. I do feel the need to reiterate that I'm not making this video to brag about the fact that I had my babies naturally. That is not where my head is at all with this. I always feel afraid to talk about my birth experiences, because I never want to unintentionally make someone feel bad if they weren't able to have a natural birth, because I do understand that things happen and it's not meant to be for everyone. It's not even right for everyone. I am thankful for doctors and the medical interventions that can really save lives in these situations. So I'm not like trying to be all like, you have to have your babies naturally or you're a terrible person. That's not where I'm coming from at all. I'm coming from a place of love and encouragement, and I just want to share my story. All right, so with my first daughter, she is 3 years old now. She came 12 days early, all on her own. I was very active with that pregnancy, always walking, exercising. I lifted weights. I did a lot of yoga. I was very, very active. So here is me about 2 days before I went into labor. This is the last belly picture that I took. So this was on a Thursday. And at this point, I had already been 1 centimeter dilated for quite a few weeks. And I believe I was 80% effaced at this point. So things were happening. She had been head down since about 35, 36 weeks, I think. So anyways, on that Friday, I went and had a checkup, my 38-week appointment, and they told me that I wasn't really progressing any more than I had been since the last appointment, which was fine. I was only 38 weeks, but I was still discouraged because I just wanted things to keep moving. So after that appointment, I did go home and I took a long walk, and then I did some yoga, and sure enough, that night at midnight, I felt my first teeny tiny contraction. So I just went back to sleep, and I slept till morning. I was able to sleep through the contractions. And then when I got up, I was still contracting all throughout the day. They were fairly close together, between 5 and 15 minutes apart, but they weren't super strong. So I contracted all day long. I also lost my mucus plug about midday. And then at about 6:30 p.m., we went to the hospital, where they told me that, nothing was really happening. They thought this was false labor, so they were going to send us back home. but they did say that we could stay for a couple more hours to check again just to be sure. So we stayed, I walked the halls, just moved around, and then they checked me again, and sure enough, I was in labor. So they told me to stay. I'm definitely in labor. I should have a baby by the morning. So at this point, contractions weren't still all that strong, but by about 11 p.m. is when things really picked up. I would say that's when my hard, active labor started. So here in this picture, I'm just walking around. You'll see these cords kind of hanging from me. They did have me hook up to the monitor every hour or so, but I was free to roam around and walk around and things like that, which is very, very important and essential for a natural childbirth. I was fortunate to also have a labor tub in the room, so I was in and out of the tub as needed. And when I was in the tub, they had a Doppler that they could check the baby while I was in the tub. They did not allow me to give birth in the water, but this tub actually, I don't think, would have been the best for that anyways. It's not ideal, but it was good enough to where it helped with the pain when I really needed it. I also used the shower a couple times. And here I am just in the tub again. And these pictures, they don't do the situation justice. It doesn't look like I'm in pain, but these were obviously in between contractions. During contractions, I was in much more pain. It was very intense. This picture here, I believe I had already started pushing. So at about 10 in the morning, I was at 9.5 centimeters, and they said I could start pushing. I wasn't fully at 10, but I was just in so much pain and just ready to go that they let me start pushing. So I started pushing and pushed for about an hour and 15 minutes, and then at around 11:15, Ember was born. And so they placed her directly on my stomach and then did whatever they needed to do while she was on me and things like that. And I started breastfeeding shortly after. One of the great things about giving birth in the hospital is once you're done and everything's all good to go, they bring you food and you can just relax. You have nurses waiting on you, and it's just kind of really nice in that way. So that was Ember's birth story. No complications, everything went smoothly. I progressed fairly quickly. Like I said, I was in hard labor for 12 hours. Yeah, so fast forward now to Ivy. So our girls are 22 months apart. So this is the last belly picture I took with Ivy. I think this was maybe about a week before I had her. And I was using the boba wrap for belly support because I was just really hurting and in a lot of pain with Ivy, so I used that to hold up my belly quite a bit. And so with Ivy, we did have one like labor scare, I guess if you want to call it. I would have been fine to have her at that point, but a few days before my due date, we went to the hospital thinking I was in labor, but it was a false alarm. They sent us back home. Ivy came exactly on her due date, which was crazy because I thought for sure she'd be early, just like Ember was, but she was not. She came on her due date, all on her own. I woke up at about 1 in the morning feeling contractions, and here's some pictures that I took while I was laboring of Erin and Ember sleeping in our bed. So I was just kind of up, out and about. I took a shower, got some hot water on my back. I have a exercise ball at home. I used that. Contractions did pick up quite fast. The intensity came pretty quick with Ivy. So at about 6:30 in the morning, we went to the hospital, and by the time we got to the hospital, I was already 6 centimeters dilated, which was really encouraging. But once we got there, my labor did stall. I do believe it was just the physical act of going to the hospital, and then also with Ivy, I tested positive for Group B strep. So at the particular hospital I was giving birth at, I was required to have IV antibiotics, which I also believe stalled my labor a little bit. I couldn't move around as much as I wanted to, and I also I don't like having an IV in. It just made me feel really tense. So those things I do believe are powerful enough to stall labor, and that's what happened with me because I was stuck at 7 centimeters for quite a few hours. But eventually things did progress. I started pushing, and so with Ember I pushed for 1 hour and 15 minutes. Ivy I pushed for 6 minutes, and she was out. She came very fast once I started pushing. So this picture here was less than an hour before she came out. So things were pretty much as intense as they can get at this point. And like I said before, this picture, it doesn't even do it justice. It just looks like I'm crying, but it was by this time that I was screaming, "Why, God, why?" at the top of my lungs during the contractions, and then violently sobbing in between. So I am not a quiet laborer. There was a lot of screaming, but then she came, like I said, after 6 minutes of pushing, and again, same with Ember, they placed her directly on my stomach, and Ivy nursed within minutes of coming out. I put her to the breast. So yeah, everything went fine with Ivy as well. With both girls, I did tear in the same spot. I just kind of retore the same spot with the second one, but it was not a huge tear, just a couple stitches. With both girls, afterwards, I had a shot of Pitocin. I obviously didn't have any Pitocin during labor. I felt very strongly about not doing that, if at all possible. And but they really wanted me to have Pitocin afterwards to help kind of you know, get your uterus to contract to prevent bleeding. And this is something that I did fight against at first, because I'm like, why is this totally necessary? I'm breastfeeding, that's going to make my uterus contract. I just did not want the Pitocin in my body. But they just kind of talked me through it, and I eventually felt okay with having it, but I didn't want an IV, which I believe is what they would normally do, is put it through an IV. I did not want an IV, so they gave it to me in shot form, and I didn't even notice anything happen with my body really from that. It just did what it needed to do. And then also with both girls, after they came out, because I needed the stitches, I did agree to having a shot to numb me so they could stitch me up. It's just a shot right down there. And it worked with Ember, but with Ivy, for whatever reason, I don't know if they didn't give me enough, it did not numb me, and I could feel them stitching me up. I could literally feel the needle going in, but honestly at that point, after you've just given birth, it's something that you can totally handle, but still it was not pleasant. Also, I am Rh negative, so I have a negative blood type. So for those who aren't familiar with that, I was not familiar with this until I had babies. I didn't even know my blood type, but I have a negative blood type, and Aaron has a positive blood type, so obviously there's a chance that our babies can have positive blood types, and that can cause some serious problems for the baby when a negative blood type woman gives birth to a positive blood type baby. It's something that does need to be addressed, and the way they do that is they give you a shot of what's called Rogam. You get that at 27 weeks pregnant, and then shortly after you give birth, if the baby's blood type is in fact positive. So that is also something I was really freaked out about with the first one, because going into my first birth, I was just all about, you know, there will be no foreign substances entering my body whatsoever. So like, why are you trying to give me all these shots of stuff? But it's really not a big deal. They've been doing it for a long time, so I feel very comfortable and okay with it now. So I had those shots during both of my pregnancies, and then both our girls are in fact positive blood types, so I had that also again shortly after I gave birth. It is possible to experience some degree of trauma even if your birth goes completely normally and nothing bad happens, just because of the pain. If you have your baby naturally all the way through the end, the pain you experience, there's no point trying to put it in words. It is the most painful thing you will ever experience in your entire life. So that in itself is traumatic. And with Ivy, our second, although labor was about half as long and pushing was much, much shorter, the contractions were very much more intense and more painful, more just quick and just intensified. So Ivy out of the two was the more traumatic experience for me. So those are my birth stories.